Welcome to Manspeqtive Africa, your favorite show. Of course, I'm your host, Danny Shodongo, aka the son of Kano. And I said that in March, we're doing a series of conversations of powerful women because it is International Women's Day, which is March 8th. But there's nothing about women that is celebrated in one day. It must be a month. It's a month birthday. It's a month Valentine. It's a month International Women's Day. And today I have the pleasure to host somebody who is incredible and is doing amazing work. Her name is Sandra Kimokoti. Sandra, welcome to the show.
Asante sana. I'm glad to be here.
How are you feeling being on the Manspeqtive show?
Good. I'm excited.
You're excited?
Yeah.
There's a lady we hosted called Wise, and she said that from Manspeqtive, she had like 5 marriage proposals.
Wow. Should I be hopeful?
All right. And I think that's very interesting. And of course, you can follow this conversation. The hashtag is Manspeqtive Africa. We are coming from Airtime Communications. And of course, let us know what you think. There's an SMS line that is going here. And this conversation is made possible courtesy of Airtime Communication, a studio in Wood Avenue. You can come and do your production needs here, jingles, all that stuff. Sandra, you have a very interesting story. And maybe for the sake of our audience, you can tell us what you do.
My day job.
Okay.
I'm a chief commercial officer at Twende Sports and Nairobi City Thunder. So Nairobi City Thunder is Kenya's top basketball team. We were the first Kenyan team to qualify for the Basketball Africa League last year. Yeah. And so in that role, I oversee revenue and brand. So everything that has to do with how is money coming into the company. And then on the brand side, how are we showing up to the world and to our fans? All
right. How we show up to the world and to our fans. I love that. It's a very interesting choice of words. So from the beginning, did you ever want to be in sport? Was this a thing that you always wanted to do from a very young age?
Yes, but not in this way.
Okay. So tell me how you started your career, how your career started,
So I was born into a family that loved sports.
Okay.
I have 5 brothers. Both my parents are avid sport fans or athletes themselves. My mom was a sprinter. My dad is a karate black belt.
Okay.
And so growing up, I played basketball because it was just the thing that you did if you're born into my family. All my brothers played basketball, so I grew up playing basketball, sprinting. And when I was in class 8, I actually had the ambition of representing Kenya in the 800 meters. And I would have these dreams of being on the Olympic stage one day. Yeah. And so I desired to be in the sports space. In high school, I played basketball. And then for university, went to the US for my undergrad. I got there and realized I did not have the height or the skill required to play college basketball in the US. And so, it was like, okay, now what do I do? But I knew just the way I worked and the way my mind worked, I needed some structure athletically. I needed to be in a team sport.
Yeah.
And I saw these posters on campus, come try rugby. And so I went. And the first day, my coach had me tackle someone. And then she just said, you come back tomorrow. And that's how I joined the rugby team.
The rugby team, the university. All right. So at this time you were doing, what course are you doing and where are you in this university?
So I was in a school called Brown University. It's an Ivy League university in the US. I was doing biochemistry and molecular biology.
Biochemistry and molecular biology.
I thought I would become a research scientist that also plays rugby on the side. And then 2 years into that program, I realized, this is not for me. And it was tough because I was doing well academically. Like I was doing really well. But I was feeling deeply unfulfilled. I was not enjoying lab work, the research. And so in my school, you had to do, if you were a science major, you had to do a thesis to graduate. And you had to do a year-long, research project. And I couldn't find any topic that even remotely interested me. But I was thinking, okay, I'm 2 years into the degree, 2 years left. Let me just push through. But I also knew, and I would say to my friends, the one thing I was sure I wanted to do was to play rugby professionally. That one I was sure about. The biochem thing, I wasn't so sure. So finish second year, go to third year, finish third year, and I'm just like, I have 1 more year left in school, but I cannot see myself finishing this degree. I just cannot. I can't. And so what I do, I talk to the school and I tell them I would like to take some time off. Just think through things, and then I'll instead of coming back next semester, I'll push, my studies by a semester. I talked to my parents. My parents said, yeah, it's okay. Come home, figure things out. Because I told them, I don't want you to pay school fees for me to just like to be doing something that I'm not sure about. Let me think things through.
Yeah.
So that if you actually end up continuing to pay, then you're paying for something that I really want to do.
Yeah.
The school let me take some time off. Now in that time, when I came back home, I spent 2 to 3 months working with a high school in Kitale.
Okay.
And running a rugby program for the girls, Form 1 to Form 3.
Yeah.
So just combining rugby and reproductive health education.
Yeah.
So 2 days a week, we would play rugby, teach them the basics. They had never played rugby before. So it's the first time they were touching a rugby ball, learning how to pass the ball.
Yeah.
In rugby, you pass the ball backwards, not forwards, which is something that most people who haven't played rugby don't realize.
Yeah.
And so it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And then I think the school saw value because we're saying, okay, fine, the sport thing is nice. But then if you're talking about reproductive health ed and having discussions around sexuality and things that can help girls stay in school and feel like they have more agency over their bodies. And so they bought in. And so, I spent 2.5 months doing that. And then after that program, got a call up to the national team.
The Kenyan national team?
The Kenyan national team, the Lionesses.
That time, were you playing rugby in Kenya?
No, so I had just come. And actually what happened is I wrote a letter to the person who was managing the team at the time. And I said, please, could you or one of your players come and talk to my girls and just share, what rugby has done for you.
Yeah.
And so in just the exchange, then I talked about who I am, what I've been doing. And I said, okay, like, why don't you? I'll talk to the coach, come and try out. And so that's how I ended up joining the team.
The Kenyan national team, they're called the Lionesses. But I think this is very interesting because we don't perceive rugby to be, quote unquote, a woman's game.
Yeah.
And I think there are many other things we don't think they are women's things, But then you decide that this is the one thing you want to do and you go and represent Kenya, How was that for you? What was it about you that led you to make the decision?
Yeah, I think it was a good experience for me.
Okay.
But also one of the hardest things I've ever done.
Yeah.
I think when you're playing a sport at that level, there's a physical element of it, but there's also a psychological element of it, and just like the mental strength and fortitude to keep going.
Yeah.
So I think it was good for me because in terms of just the physical challenge, it was the most physically challenging thing I've ever done, and I have a lot of respect for the women I found on that team, the women I left on that team. I think the difficulty for me also came just in like the team dynamics.
Yeah.
So I was coming from a, university setting where like, that in 4 years you're leaving and you're moving on with your life. I think when you come into a setup like that where, let me call it professional, because, there was some remuneration to participate in the national team.
Yeah.
This is now people's livelihood, right? And so if a new person comes, you're actually competing with other people for that slot, right? And so sometimes the dynamics there can be a bit challenging.
Yeah.
But overall, an incredible learning experience. Yeah.
All right. Livelihood, you told me that you're being paid, and I know that you are being paid, perhaps for the sake of our audience, are you rolling in money?
I wish.
How much are you earning?
So in 2014, when I joined the team, and I'll speak for the women's team because that's the team that I had visibility on.
Yeah.
We were being paid 6,000 shillings a month. And so
12,000 shillings a month.
6,000 in 2014.
Okay.
And so the way it was broken down is in a month, you'll have 12 practice sessions. So 3 a week. And you get 500 for each. So that comes to 6,000 shillings a month. But in 2016, when I was, I went back to school and came back, rejoined the team. When I came back in 2016, it had increased from 6,000 to 12,000 shillings.
Yeah.
So by the time I was leaving now, end of that year, it was still 12,000. I think now they have a better arrangement going on, hopefully. But when I was there, it was a 6,000 to 12,000 range.
But Sandra, there's a question that is going on in my mind. I've just Googled here that Brown University has an acceptance rate of 5.2%, which means for every 100 applicants, only 5 are admitted. This means the school is extremely selective. People who go to Ivy League schools don't play rugby for the national team. They perhaps work for continental organizations, or that's how we imagine they would roll, What was it about your mindset that, made you to go against just like the common grain? And, I don't know, that's how it feels, because biochemistry and molecular biology. And then you come back and you do rugby, and then you're in Kitale teaching girls. And this feels like, a very extraordinary sort of path for, the people we perceive to be Ivy League, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think a few things that led me in that direction.
Yeah.
I was honestly just following my heart.
Okay.
My heart wanted to play rugby, and I said I'll play rugby.
Yeah.
And then fortunately for me, even as I was playing for the national team, I had another job that I was doing.
Oh.
Yes.
You were actually employed?
Yes. In 2016. So yeah, I was working for a management consulting company.
Yeah.
And so that was my day job.
Okay.
And then, so we'd have training in the morning as a national team, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. And then before you shower, eat breakfast, get to work, it's about 11 a.m.
Yeah.
So then I'd be in the office from 11 a.m. to maybe 7, go home.
Yeah.
Consulting it's a intense industry. And so sometimes you're working late nights, and then, it's early mornings for training. So it took a toll on my body.
Yeah.
But for me, I knew that this is something that I wanted to explore and see how it can work out for me.
Yeah.
I think sometimes what happens, you, especially in our system, the Kenyan system, it's easy to find yourself being pigeonholed.
Yeah.
If you're an athlete, you're told, okay, we're named to a sports, we're named to a rugby, we're named to a bake.
Yeah.
So you do that.
Yeah.
But we are multifaceted,
Yeah.
right? As a human being, you have many interests.
Yeah.
Maybe you like drawing, you like music. Now, just because you like music or you like sports doesn't necessarily mean that you should pursue that thing for commercial gain. It's fine to do it just because you enjoy it. And for me, that's what rugby was for me. I was doing it just because I enjoyed it.
Yeah. And you are good at it, actually.
The 6,000, 12,000 shillings was not what was keeping me there, right?
Yeah.
But I did it because I was enjoying it. And I think that we need to be a bit more accepting or allowing people to chase multiple interests, multiple talents, especially at a young age, as opposed to feeling like you pick this thing when you're in Form 4 and that's the thing that you do until you die. Right? I think it's even as adults, let alone children, it's okay to give ourselves room for our interests to change, right? Because the future version of you might not have the same desires as the present version of you.
Yeah.
So while you're now in the present, why don't you just explore, what's on your table, sample, and then, if you like it, go down that path. If you don't, explore something different.
All right. But I'm also thinking about the girls who perhaps this 12,000 shillings was their entire income.
And they were there.
They were there.
Yeah.
How was that for them?
I mean, it's, I'm not them. Okay. So I'm cautious about speaking to somebody else's experience.
Yeah.
But I think you could just see the stress, right? You could see the stress. For me, I had another job to cushion me, which means I could take Ubers after training to go to work.
Yeah.
I could pay for certain supplements for myself, right? When somebody is balancing 12,000 shillings of the entire budget, one, they can only take matatus, right? So that is, their primary mode of transport. You're seeing the mental math being done. If, for example, allowances are late between when am I going to pay rent? And so, we were on this 12,000 shillings a month, and then if you get to go for an international tournament, let's say like Dubai Sevens, then you each get $100 or 10,000 shillings. At the time, the dollar was 100 shillings, and people would be depending on that money, to pay rent and whatnot. So I could see the stress, and I could understand where the extreme intensity was coming from to make the squad, because it was actually a financial
decision.
It had real financial implications on my teammates.
But for you, really, it was, you're doing this because you loved it and you're good at it. And so, there are many other factors that you're looking at,
Yeah.
I don't want to rush this story, but it's very interesting that you're national team rugby, but then eventually you're telling us that you are the CFO, not CFO rather, but you are doing work with Twende Sports, which is in basketball, How do you navigate? I mean, how did that journey transition from that to this?
Yes. Yeah. So let me first talk about how I transitioned out of rugby.
Yeah.
2016, after the Olympics, that year, both the men's and women's teams, rugby sevens, went to the Olympics, came back. I rejoined the national team after they came back from the Olympics, so I didn't get to go for the Olympics. But I was juggling now this rugby career and my consulting career, and I was finding it extremely difficult. Just time-wise, I felt like I didn't have time for my family. Which was a big reason why I came back home from the US. I just wanted to spend more time with my family, my parents, my siblings, my friends. But, between leaving the house at 6 a.m. to make it to training and then getting back at night, having to work late, waking up again early, and then, on the weekends you have games. It was just, it took a toll on my body.
Yeah.
It took a toll on my body, and I had to make a choice between these two things, right? And it was a choice between doing one thing really well or doing two things in a mediocre way.
Yeah.
And so then I picked one of the two things, and I picked the thing where, the income was significantly higher, could pay my bills comfortably. And also the thing where I felt like I had a long future in this thing. I think with rugby, I felt, okay, you can train, but there were many women on the team who are way better than I was, right? I wasn't a starter. I was a sub. And so then I was just doing the math and thinking, okay, where am I going to put my eggs? Is it going to be on this 12,000 gig where I'm a sub and I'm not guaranteed to even go for international tournaments? Or will it be on this thing where I'm entry level, I'm starting out, I'm doing well in my career, there's very many opportunities open to me. And so then it was a career decision. So then chose to step away from rugby. But then now the interesting thing, so that was about a year of time I had spent in consulting. About 2 years into the consulting job, I knew that I wanted to spend a lot more time in sports.
Before that, so did you go back to school? Did you finish this degree? What happened?
Yes. So
after that period that you rested,
so when I came back home, did the coaching gig, played for the national team. When I was playing for the national team, I was now interning with this consulting company and ended up hiring me in the future. And so after that internship, I went back and I finished. So I just switched it from biochemistry to biology. It was a bit simpler to finish. It had 1 year left, but I'd already done most of the classes. So I finished, I got my degree in biology. Then I came back to do this consulting job and to continue playing rugby. Then tell me about how now you get into consulting. Tell me the story. Yes. So now about 2 years into my consulting career, and then a year after I had retired from rugby, I had a knowing feeling that I need to spend more time in the sports space. But I was a bit confused about how do I make this transition. I was looking at the ecosystem here and I was like, who can employ me and give me a similar salary as to what I'm getting in this job? And there was no one, right? And also just like the environments, like what kind of work environment do I want to work in? But for me, the really big question was, I was trying to understand what's happening on the business side that the federation can only afford to pay us 12,000 shillings. Like what does that look like on the back end? And I really wanted to understand now the business element of sports. But I also felt like I had a bit more just growing up to do professionally, that is. And so I ended up staying in that consulting job for another 3.5 years. So I was there for 5.5 years total. And then I decided I was going to make this transition by way of a master's degree. So I went to NYU, New York University, to do a master's in sports business. And New York was was a tactical choice for me. It's a big sports city. So if you look at the US market, most major cities have one sports team for each sport. They'll have like one basketball team, one football team, American football, one soccer team, one baseball team. New York has two, right? Has 2 basketball teams, 2 hockey teams, 2 soccer teams, 2 baseball teams. So it's a big sports city. And then outside of the teams, the ecosystem supporting the sports industry is quite rich, right? So you have data analytics companies, you have agencies that are based there. And it just felt like a good place to sink my teeth into this world of sports. So I went there in August of 2021. In fact, I was supposed to go in 2020, but COVID changed things. So deferred to 2021, and it was a very enriching experience because I was doing this master's, but then I also spent about 8 months interning with an agency on that side. And spending some time with a strategy team. And so they would work with professional and college teams in the US and help them figure out how they're growing on the business side, from a fan engagement perspective, from stadium feasibility, from sponsorship evaluation. And so I spent 8 months interning with them and I was like a sponge, just sucking all the knowledge in. And then, once after graduation, I figured, okay, I've spent a bit of time supporting teams, but I hadn't really worked with a league. And so I was like, let me try and get experience with a league. And I joined a startup league, a cycling league actually, which was interesting because cycling is not a mainstream sport, at least in the US. And so it was a very niche sport. And so I spent some time as a chief of staff. So one, helping the league raise funding to keep it going, and then just helping to set up new systems and processes. I did that for a year. And so between finishing the master's and starting this new job, I got introduced to a guy called Colin Rasmussen, who had spent some time in Kenya. I had spent some time, about 2 years or so, trying to put up like a sports facility and run like a sports academy for young people, and it wasn't quite working out the way he hoped, and he was wanting to do something in the basketball space. So we got introduced by a mutual friend, and he said, hey, I want to do something in basketball in Kenya. Do you want to join me? And I said, absolutely. So it was me, Colin, and two other people, Steven, Domingo, and Kushin Dirie. Yeah. And so January 2023, Twende Sports was born when I was still in the US.
Okay.
So yeah, was at that time doing my full-time job with the cycling league, but really just advising Twende Sports, like remotely on sponsorship and whatnot. But then I moved back home beginning of 2024, and then thereafter I joined Twende Sports full-time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, Sandra, that yours sounds like a really incredible journey, because you're very privileged that you actually knew these things. That, for example, I want to do sports, a master's degree in sports business. I know which university I want to go to. I know this, that entire city, why I'm going there, Many of us just sometimes stumble onto things, you know. What's your reflection around that particular intentionality that you think you have enjoyed? Yeah.
I think it sounds very polished when I tell the story. Yeah. But on the back end, there was actually a lot of confusion and a lot of self-doubt and a lot of questions. Yeah. So for example, when I was making the decision to go back to school, a lot of people were telling me, do an MBA, right? With your kind of profile, your kind of background, you've gone to an Ivy League school, you worked in management consulting, do an MBA at a top tier university and you'll be set for life. And I was just like, but that's not what I want. I just want to spend time in the sports industry, and I want to do a master's in sports. Yeah. And I had a lot of people telling me, you're making the wrong choice. Like, are you going to make any money in sports? And there was a lot of actually just like pushback. I had, at my consulting career, I had gotten a number of promotions. So I was climbing up the ladder. There were questions about like, why are you leaving now? It doesn't make any sense. You're so close to the top. And so there was actually a lot of questions about, is this even the right path for you? Yeah. But for me, I felt like if I don't take that jump at that point in time, I would never do it, right? Yeah. I was in my 20s. I didn't have dependents. I didn't have kids. And I was worried that if I stay on this path, I would get to a point of golden handcuffs where now I feel like I'm too comfortable to leave.
That I just have to do it, yeah.
Yeah, it's now or never. Yeah. And so I said, let me just do it now. And I spent quite a bit of time talking to people, almost 2 years. Yeah. Just talking to people, asking questions, trying to figure out what school makes sense for me. Even when I got admitted, I didn't have enough money to go the first time. Yeah. The school gave me a partial scholarship, but I had to raise the rest of the funding. And so that was actually why I deferred. I just didn't have enough money to go, right, in 2020. So I ended up pushing it 2021. And so it wasn't all rosy in the background, but I did know, the one thing that I was sure about is I want to spend time in this space. So even the doubts, the anxiety, the questions were around, how do I make it happen? I knew it was the thing I wanted, but it was about how do I make it happen? Yeah. And I think that even just the belief to say, I'm going to chase it, came from my parents. Okay. Because my parents they were always of the idea of do what will fulfill you. Like for them, the big thing is you're able to stand on your own 2 feet. Whatever industry you choose that to be in, that's up to you. Yeah. Yeah. And so I feel like just having their support gave me the reassurance of, listen, I can go out and I can experiment. But also, honestly, I was quite privileged, right? Yeah. I knew if this thing fails, I was still living in my parents' house. Yeah. They were paying their bills. Yeah. They were putting food on the table. Yeah. And I think that it's something that we don't always openly talk about, that sometimes you're just in a position of privilege where you can actually afford to take certain risks. And I could afford to take that risk. Yeah. Yeah.
But then there are those who are in places of privilege, but they don't take those risks because of maybe lack of knowledge or lack of clarity of purpose. I think there's also a bit of, you need to pat yourself in the back that there's certain clarity, that you had from a very young age that I love this sport and this is what I want to do. You know? It's not very easy that we do that, So before we go on a short commercial breaks, what's Twende Sports? What's Twende Sports about? Yeah.
I love Twende Sports.
Okay.
So Twende Sports is a sports enterprise that focuses on basketball. Okay. For now. Yeah. We run a professional men's basketball team called Nairobi City Thunder, but we also run some amateur programs, for youth basketball. So we have a men's and women's team that plays in a league called the Nairobi Street League. Yeah. And then we also run just like youth programs with basketball for young kids. So we have a program that we support called Dementa, that works with South Sudanese boys in Nairobi, mostly high school age. Equipping them with life skills through basketball and helping them get scholarships in different high schools that can, give them an education, even as they play basketball. So that's Twende Sports in a nutshell.
Caleb Maru wrote a very glowing tribute to you guys. These guys took a struggling basketball team in Nairobi to Africa's NBA in 18 months. Now they're building the Chicago Bulls of Africa. Meet Twende Sports. Wow. Interesting. And he talks about numbers and incredible stuff. And, now you guys are just doing amazing stuff. So tell me more about Twende Sports. You've just given me a bit of a description. But I want to begin this conversation where you leave management consulting, which I think, with the little knowledge I have, is much more stable. You're likely to earn a lot more than you can earn in a sports startup. What madness was this?
What madness?
Yeah,
I think it's the madness of what if.
Okay.
And there's a saying, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And I think that's what was pushing me. I was like, the chances of failure are big, but if I don't fail, it will be epic.
Okay.
And so I think it was always just push to just explore and create something that I felt I hadn't seen happen in the sports arena here.
Yeah.
In the way that, I would have liked to experience it as an athlete myself.
Yeah.
And so with Twende Sports, the four of us, the four co-founders, I think a big part of the ethos of the company is about creating opportunities for young people through sports, right? Like, you don't need statistics to tell you about the unemployment problem in this country. You just need to walk on the street and you'll see how people are struggling to find employment. And so part of the thing that we have been trying to do is think through how can we create viable jobs for young people. And when I say viable jobs, I mean jobs that are stable, dignified work. Yeah, dignified work. And so with our flagship property, which is Nairobi City Thunder, the men's pro basketball team, all our athletes and coaches are on a salary.
Wow.
That means that our players don't need another job in the way that I needed when I was playing rugby for the country.
Yeah.
They don't need another job to supplement their income, right? This is their full-time job.
Yeah.
And it's about asking the question, like, what does it look like when players can focus full-time on their craft?
Yeah.
So what that has allowed us to do, one is we've been able to attract top talent, right? Because now the best players are saying, if I'm going to play, I might as well play for somebody that is going to be paying me a decent wage. Yeah. So it's about compensation, but it's also about the structure and professionalism around the team, right? And so we treat our players as pros, but we also expect them to carry themselves like pros, right? And so we do a lot of training on things like media engagement. How do you engage with the media and the fans when you're telling your own story? If somebody from an opposing team gets into an altercation with you, how do you handle that? They have what they think, but you have to think about your own brand. And you think about the team's brand, because there's you as a player, but when you're wearing that jersey or that training kit, you represent Thunder. Yeah. And how are you showing up when you're showing up as a Thunder player? Yeah. And so we have a lot of conversations with the team around that, but also supporting them to think through other pursuits that they have outside of basketball, right? We have not all, just a few individuals who, by the time they were qualifying to be on the roster, already had other full-time jobs, right? That don't interfere with our training hours. And so a few of them still do other things on the side. Okay. One of the things we also talk about or help them think through is, you're going to be a non-athlete a lot longer than you're going to be an athlete. Yeah. And so what does that mean for how you think about your athletic career and setting yourself up for success beyond your playing days? Yeah. We also have people who are coming to set up at a very young age. So, we have, young guys that we identify either like in high school or in university. Those guys need a bit of hand holding as they're coming to the setup of like, this is how you conduct yourself in a professional setting. School is very important. And so all our athletes who are in school, it's very important that they stay in school, that they finish school, and that we support them along that journey as well. Yeah. As
you're talking, I sort of feel like your story might have some sort of similarities with some of your co-founders. What is it about the core 4 team? Because you're the only lady, there are 3 other men, 4 other men actually, or 3? 3 other men. What do you think is a thread that unites all of you to pursue such, sports and to give dignity to people who perhaps might just be playing this game as a side hustle thing and they're paid like peanuts, So
the first thing is we've all been athletes before. Okay. Right? Yeah. Steven has played for he's captain the Nigerian national team.
Wow.
He's played in the G League in the US, he's played in Europe. Yeah. So he has been a professional athlete and he understands what it means to be a pro in very different resource settings, right? Nigeria, the US, Europe. Yeah. Kush has played rugby before. Yeah. He's won a couple of championships with KPA. And so he also has a deep understanding of how basketball in Kenya works. Yeah. Colin has also played basketball before. He's run a sports startup before, but he's also done a lot of youth programming work, right? So he used to work with the Aga Khan Foundation previously. He's done a lot of work in with running youth programs. Actually, one of the things that he realized when he was doing that job is when they were thinking about creating economic opportunities for young people, there's what funders think are viable, right? And so you'll see a lot of funding going towards agriculture and tech and whatnot. Yeah. But there's a big push for young people who want jobs in the creative economy. Yeah. So entertainment, sports, podcasting, content creation. And so he was thinking about how do we tap into job creation in this space? And so I think, one thing that unites, I say the second thing other than all being athletes is we've worked with young people before, or we've been in settings where we've seen young people coming up through the sports ecosystem and trying to make opportunities, right? I remember my teammates when I was playing rugby. Yeah. Struggling to balance a household with 12,000 shillings a month, right? Yeah. And so we have experience with what that looks like. And so when we think about athletes, we also think through how we're supporting them, right? Yeah. We know that, for example, medical cover is important. You want somebody to be able to play with peace of mind. Yeah. Know that if anything happens, they're protected. So it's things like those that, individually might seem small, but when you bring them all together, create a very supportive environment for the team to thrive.
Yeah. When I was doing a bit of my reading, I noticed that Nairobi City Thunder is, the original Nairobi City Thunder was a team that was based in Jericho, where? Shaurimoyo in Eastlands. And of course, they'd done well before. But then there's just this incredible, investment that you guys put in and heart that eventually then transforms it into the team that is now going to represent Kenya in Basketball Africa League. Yeah. So maybe perhaps, what are your reflections around just the potential that sports has? Maybe even as you tie into the story of the Nairobi City Thunder, where it started and all these things, and now where it is right now.
Yeah, I think first of all, let me just say that the original founders of the team did an incredible job sustaining that team. Yeah, because it was a team that was self-funded for many years. There was periods of time where they had sponsorship. So very early days, NSSF was a partner, and then ICC was a partner. And then many years later, Twende Sports came into the picture in 2023. Yeah. But that team of, Faustin, OJ, Griff, Gaia, those four did a really good...
Griff?
Yeah, he was a player, but, was part of that team. Okay. And so I think those guys and everybody that had come through that system initially, I think we owe them a huge congratulations because even the years they were a self-funded team, they were a highly competitive team. Okay. Highly competitive team. And so even as we were coming in to take charge of a team that already had a certain level of credibility.
Yeah, just to build from,
Yes, to build from a foundation that had already been laid, right? Yeah. And so I think, very happy that we were able to work something out. Yeah. The opportunity is huge. Yeah. And I'll talk about basketball because that's the space that I now operate in. Yeah. If you look at the investment that NBA Africa is making the continent in basketball, it's humongous, right? So NBA, together with a number of different private investors, both individual and institutional, stood up NBA Africa, right? And NBA Africa runs a league called the Basketball Africa League. Okay. So every year, different teams compete, and then the 12 to qualify, and then the top 12 that qualify play against each other to be crowned the BAL champion for that particular year. Okay. So this was set up in 2019. We never had a Kenyan team qualify up until December 2024, where Thunder became the first Kenyan team to actually qualify. Okay. And so that was a big milestone for us. But if you look at how NBA Africa is going about this, yes, they want the teams to do well, but they also want to invest in grassroots basketball, right? So right now, they're running what they call junior NBA camps for school kids. There's plans to help set up quite a number of basketball courts across the African continent, right? Because you can't play without the infrastructure. And so there's a big opportunity, a commercial opportunity, right? Because sports is one of those few aspects of entertainment where it's it's a live entertainment. You don't know who's going to win. So there's a certain level of intensity and, fun that comes from just like the unpredictability of it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of brands that are looking for credible sports properties that they can partner with to reach that audience, right? And if you look at how sports fans carry themselves in an arena, in a stadium, there's incredible amounts of energy that brands are looking to capitalize on.
Yeah.
So there's a huge employment opportunity in terms of just the commercial output, the jobs you can create. But outside of the numbers, there's also a big opportunity in just like community development, right?
Yeah.
Studies have shown that when kids are very active in sports, crime goes down in those neighborhoods.
Mental health, actually.
Mental health, physical and mental health, right?
Yeah.
Just taking care of your body in a way that makes sense. Social connections, social ties.
Yeah.
Kids that grow up playing team sports are just socially better than kids that don't.
Even just performance in school actually improves when you play.
Yes. And so there's a lot of benefits to supporting the sports ecosystem, both for the community and just commercial. It makes sense however way you look at it.
All right. Yeah. I think maybe it's not coming out to me. I mean, I'm not getting it very clearly. What does it mean to make it to BAL as the first Kenyan team?
Yeah.
Is it... Maybe give us an equivalent, maybe for people who don't know anything about, say, basketball. Because I think it's a big deal.
Yeah.
I know it's a big deal. I read your work and stuff like that, but somebody doesn't know.
Yeah. So let me describe the journey to getting it to BAL, to maybe put things in context. In context. You first of all have to win your local league at the top division. So you have to win the Premier League equivalent in your country. To even get a chance to qualify to play the qualifiers. So winning the league doesn't automatically qualify you to join the BL. You win the league, then you play all the other clubs across the continent that also won the league in their country.
Wow.
Right? And so they group you in regions. So you play 2 rounds of qualifiers. So we won the league in July. So we took charge of Thunder Twende Sports in August of 2023. We won the Premier League in July of 2024. So our first season as management, we won the league. And then November 2024, we played the first round of qualifiers in Dar es Salaam. And then December, we played the second round of qualifiers, right? And so December was like, Elite 16. So there's 16 teams in that competition. So you play teams from different countries. So we played, I think we played Oilers from Uganda. We played Creole Stars from Cape Verde. We played MBB from South Africa. In the previous round, we played Urunani from Burundi, who had actually qualified last year. So it was good competition and a couple of other teams. And so it's a journey. It's a journey. I think, what does it mean? No Kenyan basketball team has ever gotten to this height, right? Like no club team has ever gotten to this height of the game. And so for us, it's a momentous development, both from the sport, just like a competitive angle, but also commercially.
So when are you guys going to play this BL? When is it going to be played?
So the BL will run from April to June of 2025. And so they play in different conferences. So there are 12 teams. And there are 3 conferences. So every conference has 4 teams, and you play every other team twice. And then if you make it through, then you get to play now in the playoffs, the finals in Pretoria in June. And so we as Thunder, we will be, while the games will kick off in April, we'll play our conference in May. And so, I think it'll be a good competition, because right now we've been playing locally, beating local teams. Last year we were undefeated in the league. In the qualifiers, we only lost 1 game that we lost by half a basket, 1 point. It's a new level of competition for us, but one that we are confident we're ready for. And so it's about, putting our heads down now and getting ready for it.
All right. Definitely, we're very big on governance and the larger ecosystem issues. And of course, I know you represent Twende Sports, and so there are certain things you cannot comment about. But does it, I think about why Thunder, yet we have many other brands that are supporting their teams within the basketball, is it Division 1 or what? Do you think maybe people don't see what they can get out of this? Is it a framing problem, or is just the way we treat sports in this country? We run shoddy elections, whether it's in rugby or whatever. Then we have, people who never want to leave office once they get in, and they're going to be removed. And we've had, even in football, FIFA has always intervened, when government wants to do all these things. Do you think it's that sort of the way we treat sports that stops brands from putting money, or just there's no structure and there's no system?
Yeah, it's a combination of those things. if let me assume I'm not sitting on the other side.
Okay.
If I'm a corporate partner, or I'm running a certain brand and I want to be affiliated with a particular sports team, I'm going to look at like, one, how is that team being managed?
Okay. So management.
I'm going to look at what's their fan base. What are the eyeballs on the team? If I come and associate my product with them, who will be seeing my product, right? I'm also looking now. There's sponsorship that you can do at a team level, and then there's sponsorship that you can get at a league level, at a federation level, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where, for many of our sports, there's a big challenge, right? Yeah. Because if there's a history or reports of poor governance, then brands now don't want to put their name on that, and brands don't want to be associated with that, right? If there's cases in court, if there's reports of mismanagement, then it becomes tricky for a brand to feel confident that they can get support, or they can get good ROI for their investment with a particular league. And so it's on us, I think, as teams, to hold our federations accountable. And we need them also to hold themselves accountable in terms of packaging the sport. There's only so much that you can do as one team.
Yeah.
But if you had 6-7 teams with the caliber of Thunder in the league, that would just propel the league through the roof, right? All of a sudden, Nyayo Stadium is too small to continue your games. You have to move elsewhere because the fans are standing. Like, there's no seats, right? Yeah. But then for those teams to thrive, they need a setup where the federation or the league is actually doing things well, like securing a media partner that can then earn broadcast revenues for the league, securing a good venue where fans can have a quality fan experience when they come to watch the games, and the roofs are not leaking, the lights are not broken,
and the toilet is not smelling,
things like that, right? Where teams know if they bring fans to a game, there's actually can be able to benefit from those revenues, right? There's a clear commercial incentive for teams to also promote the games.
It's very, very interesting because majority of the people who play basketball, actually, like the most competitive basketball in this country, we both have a female league and we have a male league, and actually most of them are young people. So by investing in sports, we can actually deal with the monster of unemployment in this country. I don't think we see it like that. We see sports as the one thing where I can go and get if I'm a politician, I can come and get my t-shirts written, Danish Odongo Super Cup.
Yes.
And I do it over the period of holidays, and then I get young men and women in the community, and then they play sports, and then I get my mileage, I go, But there are certain teams just beyond beyond basketball, who've actually done it up the sevens. It's been an incredibly run team. I think Gor Mahia it feels like a team that has actually enjoyed some benefit of, so they already are. And cricket in Kenya used to do so well. We were actually a global giant. Was it something like that? Okay,
that's true.
I don't know. So I think it's been done before.
It has.
It can be done again, know. So for you, if you were to write a policy brief, how would you recommend that we fix the ecosystem so that then we are able to have more Thunders, not just in basketball, but in other sports, so that then we are able to, make more money? Because if we have more fans going to the stadium, we're going to make more money. If we have more corporates coming, if we have more young people engaged, if they're going to we are definitely having society-wide development and progress for everyone.
I think for me, I would focus at the federation league level.
Okay.
Right? Because if we had a situation where, for example, if you are in office, you need to have your feet to the fire.
Okay.
If you've been in office for 2 years, you have not brought on a league level sponsor, a media rights league, it should be possible for the teams under that league to kick you out because you're not working for them. You're not putting them on TV. You're not bringing eyeballs to the game. You're not bringing financing to the game. And so I think that for me, I would say that's where the biggest gap is. The second one I would say would be on infrastructure.
Okay.
I think that the way we think about infrastructure in this country for sports is not ideal.
Okay.
I think there's because maybe recent government pronouncements, there's a thinking of like, we need just a couple of 20,000 stadiums, 20,000 capacity stadiums, and that will fix all the problems. But people in this city don't have recreational spaces. They don't have spaces where they can go and train, and you can take your kids on the weekend and watch a basketball game, and then in the evening watch a concert. We just don't have gathering spaces in this city. And so I think what we need is investment in those kinds of infrastructure. Call it 2,000, 3,000 capacity arenas, stadiums in each ward.
Within communities.
Within communities. Because then what happens is people that live there can now go there, jog on the weekends or jog in the morning. They can come on the weekend and watch their local teams play there. They can bring their kids there to train. So you're not having to pay exorbitant fees to get your kid into a certain academy. There's just space. You can come and gather and play and train. And I think it's actually a justice issue.
Yeah.
It's an equity and a justice issue, because you think about who in this city can afford to access those kinds of facilities, where it's a covered facility, it's an all-weather facility, you can train, come rain or shine, it's well maintained, right? Whose kids can ride bikes safely without worrying about getting hit by cars, right? I think that it's a justice issue to actually have sufficient sports infrastructure in our communities. It's a health issue. Right?
Yeah.
A number of years ago, somebody was telling me that one of the issues coming up in many of our cities' informal settlements is not just malnourishment, it's actually obesity.
Yeah.
Because kids don't have spaces to play. Right? It's a health issue.
Yeah. They've all been grabbed and turned into 12-story buildings for rent, and you're gonna have people who are unhealthy paying you rent, and I don't know how that makes you feel good. But Sandra, the city was not always like that.
No, it wasn't.
There was always Camp Toyoyo. It's still there though. In Jericho, there's this one in Dandora. There were like mini stadiums and mini spaces across the city. It wasn't always a very concrete jungle type of city. But as our
population has grown, we need more.
Yeah.
Right? We need to invest proactively in more of those. Yeah.
We need more, but also more have been grabbed. People have literally grabbed many. I mean, I have friends, like, for example, there's an urban planner called Constant Cap who grew up around this area of Kilimani. He says that where there is a famous church, the center, of a famous church in Kilimani, the headquarters of that church, that's where they used to play when he was a kid growing up in Kilimani, So I think also we must engage our governance and people and leaders, elected leaders, to think about sports from a larger, benefit level. It's economic, it's social, it's health, it's even politics. We can have better politics when people are playing.
In fact, as people are doing campaigns and there's rallies going on, I think part of civic engagement, there needs to be whether it's a module or an element there around just what your physical space looks like.
Yeah.
And that's something that we need to start holding people accountable for. Yeah. The city planners, the politicians we need playing grounds for our kids. Yeah. We need cycling lanes. We need walkable paths. We need places where we can gather and play football, play basketball, swim, etc. That needs to be in there with the campaign, in people's manifestos, because it's actually a health and equity issue.
I like that. Sandra, this sounds like, especially if talking about it being a justice issue, this sounds like a very cliche question to ask you. But of course, there are parents who tell their kids that those who are playing are, when mchezo tu uko nayo, naona unapenda mchezo. Literally, But I think they don't see how possible it is to build a career in non-traditional spaces. Maybe that could be your final comment as we end the show.
Yeah, I think what I would say to that is we owe it to our children the freedom to explore their interests.
Yeah.
Because you don't own your child. They belong to themselves. They just came to this world through you. Yeah. But they belong to themselves. They are their own person with their own ideas, their own interests. They need to make their own mistakes. Right? Yeah. And so then I would say that give them the chance to take that gamble. Yeah. Sports is one of the few areas where you do need to make that decision fairly early in life. Yeah. It's easier to try and pursue a career in sports when you're in your late teens, early 20s, mid 20s. Yeah. But then work out fine. Go and look for a corporate job or like a different, start a business or something. Yeah. It's a lot harder to shelve it and then come back when you're 40. Yeah. And say, and I want to be a professional athlete. Yeah. It's a lot, not impossible, but it's a lot harder. I think it's one of those things where the window of opportunity is really in youth. And I think you're stealing someone's future if you don't give them the chance to explore. They might explore and find out it's not viable, but give them that shot because some of us have found a path. Mine wasn't in being an athlete, but I was able to craft a journey in the business side of sports. Yeah. But some of this, it's like feeling the stones as you cross the river. Sometimes the path doesn't become clear until you start.
Yeah.
And if you don't give them the chance to start, the path may never become clear for them.
Yeah. I'm not going to end this conversation without, I was doing a bit of research, talking to my friends, and I noticed that there's a stark difference how sport is framed in certain levels of school. So for example, if you go to a district school, a provincial school, the squad that plays the game often are the ones who get the bad grades. And they're actually brought onto the team just so that they're not problematic.
And they repeat year in, year out, just so they can play.
They can play. But our friend of mine was talking about certain schools, mostly national schools, where you can't play unless your grades are right, are correct, Maybe perhaps you speak to teachers, especially of schools that might not be national in level, of, how it's possible actually to balance academic, but also with sports.
Yeah, I think to teachers, I would say, don't put students in a box.
Okay.
Don't say that because you're good at academics, you don't play sports. Allow them to play sports. In fact, that sport might be the thing that keeps their mind going in class, which was the case for me. Yeah. I think sports actually kept me alive in school. Yeah. And then, also don't give sports a bad rap. So now kids feel like, if I play on this team, it's like mini danda, because you need to be a danda. So that's who is on that squad.
Exactly.
I think allow students to explore the path that makes sense to them. You will find that you have very many students because we are not one-sided individuals.
Okay.
We are multifaceted. People can thrive at many things, right? Even though teachers have side hustles.
Yeah.
They are still teaching and having side hustles.
Exactly.
So why can't you let a student do their schoolwork and also play sports, right? So I think that's the first thing that I would say. I think the second thing I would say is that, at least when I was the schools I went to, you had to maintain a certain level of academic performance to be allowed to play. Yeah. And I remember when I joined the basketball team when I was in high school, I was told, you can't play on this team if you are below a B. Like you have to. The patron of the team told us that. She was a teacher, but she was a patron of the team. She said, if you want to stay on this team, you have to get minimum a B. Right? And it was the same thing when I was in college. Yeah. If you are getting certain grades and you're on the rugby team, they'd pull you aside and say, if you want to play next semester, you need to get a tutor and bring your grades up. Yeah. Right? And I think you can encourage students to excel at both. You don't have to pick one over the other.
Yeah. And often we pick one over the other because I think we are very pigeonhole sort of mentality.
It's very narrow-minded.
It's very narrow-minded that it's either this or this. You know? And of course, Sandra, we have to come to the final bit of this conversation. Actually, this is the first sports conversation we are having in this show, and hopefully you can help us to get more people to come here for us to discuss this thing, because I believe that sports has the potential to deal with some of the challenges that we face as a community. Somebody who's passionate about mental health, I know just what it does to move your body and to work out and to have the adrenaline pump and to just, get your body moving. It can heal many parts of you that, drugs would not ordinarily heal. Until next time, my name is Danish Odongo. It's been quite a joy hosting Sandra Kimokoti, who works for Twende Sports. And of course, she's just given us such a gem. I want to urge everybody in the sports ecosystem, but of course, government, bureaucrats and people who work in government agencies to watch this video, and even in the larger development sector, that we can actually fix some of the problems we face in Kenya by doing sports professionally. This was brought to you courtesy of Airtime Communications. It's a studio on Wood Avenue. It's fantastic. You can just come and do your production here, whether it's videography, whether it's audio, jingles, all your production needs are met here. And of course, let us know what you think. The hashtag is Manspeqtive Africa. Our YouTube channel is Manspeqtive with a Q. Subscribe, like our comment, and happy International Women's Day. My name is still Danish Odongo. Of course, you can find me on all my social media platforms. Until next time, may God bless you, and we wish Nairobi City Thunder all the very best.